I'm wrestling. You're not weak for me. Celebrate what I am. Celebrate what I have been. Celebrate what I represent. And celebrate the many ways I have impacted your life. I will survive this test as I have survived others. I am forever etched into the very fiber of all mankind. The world needs me. Time is on my side. History guarantees me. I am wrestling. Do not wait for me.
What's up, everybody? This is Ben Funky Askren, and you are listening to episode number 23 of the T-Row and Funky Show. And today, I'm going solo. Mr. Tommy Rowland's car broke down, and so he won't be with us tonight. We already have the show planned. We already have a guest coming on, so he can't be with us. So, thank you as always to Defend Soap. Defend what you have built. And our topic this week is wrestlers transitioning to the world of mixed martial arts. So I thought there's no one better to bring on to talk about this because he has a wealth of knowledge about these subjects. And now he actually works down there at FloCombat. So welcome in my buddy Front Row Brian. What's up, dude?
What's going on, Ben? Hey, thanks for that intro, man. Good to talk to you.
Yeah.
Hey, congrats on that win, man. We were all watching in the office there live.
And I just talked to one of your co-workers, Dwayne Finley, did a little interview with him. And I'm actually hoping you can do the same thing for my podcast as you did for Chael's podcast, because you're his number one rated show. Is that correct or false?
Yeah, I think he's running an angle on me that, he just makes up these numbers because, always my numbers are suspiciously above, really famous people like Stone Cold and, Paul Heyman and all these MMA stars. It's really weird. And I told him that when we were at WrestleMania, I was like, dude, you don't need to, blow up my ego. It doesn't really matter. He's like, no, man, those are the numbers. So I don't know. I don't know. Maybe he's still working me. Maybe he's not.
Well, I'll tell you with ours. I know I can. I'm going to click on right now. You can click on the SoundCloud app, which has our show, and you can see exactly what the numbers are for all the previous shows. We had 4,500 last week, Brian, and then obviously that does not include the iTunes numbers. So, those might be significantly higher. But so we'll see what you do. Maybe you do a huge number, and we have you on more regularly.
We'll see what those numbers are, man. I'll be checking. I'll be pimping this on Twitter. People will be sick of seeing it.
Cool. Well, so like I said, we're going to talk about wrestlers getting MMA. You follow amateur wrestling. You obviously have followed MMA forever. You have a good understanding of the business of it. And so I thought a good place to start this discussion would be with UFC 197 this weekend, because you have Henry Cejudo, who's an Olympic gold medalist, so obviously the very, very, very highest of high-level wrestlers. And then you also have John Jones, who was the only guy to beat Daniel Cormier, who's also an Olympian, and who was a wrestler himself, who had a fair amount of success and decided to take up fighting at an early age. So before we get into the wrestling discussion, let's talk about these fights this weekend. How do you see both of those fights going?
I hate to pick against Cejudo, but I really think Demetrius Johnson at this point, at that weight class, is pretty much unbeatable. But it just seems like, once you start putting that unbeatable tag on these guys, they eventually fall. I don't think this is going to be the one, though. I just think Demetrius he's just so quick and, so precise, and he never runs out of gas. And, I've had this argument with people that I have not been that impressed by Henry Cejudo in the UFC. I think I was sitting with you last year watching UFC 160 something in Madison, Wisconsin.
Oh yeah.
And he was fighting a teammate of yours, maybe Chico.
Yeah, he fought Chico Camus in Japan, I believe.
Yeah. So I was not that impressed.
Chico is notoriously tough to take. He is no one in the gym can take him down. So he is tough to take. Henry did not get a takedown on him, I believe. And people were trying to credit my coaching skills, but I gotta say, it probably didn't have a lot to do with that. Chico is just freaking tough to take down. I don't know what to tell you. But go ahead.
I think it's going to turn into more of a striking contest. I think Demetrius Johnson is going to be really hard to take down.
Yeah, 100%.
So and they're going to be fighting in that big cage. That's a lot of real estate for Demetrius to move about. And then in the main event, I mean, John Jones.
Let me cut in on the Cejudo topic first. So I got two things which contradict each other. These are my two thoughts about that fight. So number one, I think, when I watch Henry posts all these little clips. We're friends on Facebook and stuff, so he posts these little clips of him training. And one of the things I don't like is he's always boxing, just strictly boxing, and he's always working on power. And why I don't like that is because Demetrius, what he does so well is he moves so well, he's hard to hit, and his transition game from striking to takedowns to jiu-jitsu is so smooth. So I think that's kind of where you got to be able to match him. He's not going to stand there and slug with you, so I don't know that power is going to be a huge factor in this. So that kind of scares me. Have you seen those same things or no?
Yeah, I've even seen, statistical data. There's a guy named Reed Kuhn who puts together all these statistics.
Oh, yeah, he's fantastic.
Yeah, he's got some statistics that shows power at 125, it doesn't exist. It's like the physics involved, the size of the guys and the amount of force that they can create is just not, it's not much. So that's why you don't see these highlight reel knockouts. Sometimes Demetrius will get a finish, but it's like,
Dodson's got one or two.
The other guy quit.
Yeah, there's been a few, but yeah, definitely not a lot. It's rare at that division. And then my other thought about this fight is that, like you said, Henry's beat, the best guy he's beat is a number 7 guy, I think. I'm pretty sure. But the thing about Henry would be that in 2008 when he won the Olympics, no one was predicting that. I mean, he had done nothing to that point that led anyone to believe he's going to win the Olympics, right? And so what that tells me is that he knows how to rise to the occasion, and even though it may not look like he's there, and like it didn't look like that in 2008, and then he just goes and wins the freaking Olympics. So I think he definitely has that ability to surprise us on Saturday night. I think it's there for sure. I think he believes in himself, which I don't know is going to be enough against Demetrius, but I don't think he's one of those guys who's cashing his chips and said, I'm going to get my ass kicked and call it a day.
That's a really good point, because you go back to 2013 and the early part of 2014, Henry Cejudo was kind of a laughingstock in the MMA world.
Oh, yeah,
it was the butt of a lot of jokes because, dude, it wasn't like he would show up and miss weight. He would no-show the weigh-ins.
He went to the hospital a bunch of times. No, it was like 3 times in Legacy maybe or something.
Yeah, it was in Legacy FC out of Houston, and I was all excited about this Olympic gold medalist coming over to mixed martial arts, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Is this guy a flake, or how the hell did he win an Olympic gold medal? And he can't make weight, and he's got 28 hours to rehydrate. But I don't know. I guess somebody
I don't have good insight into I don't have good insight into what he was doing there. But I remember that and being just dumbfounded by him, the failure to make weight, because like you said, wrestlers, that's what we do. I mean, I was telling someone the other day about how in wrestling, like if you miss by in college wrestling, legitimately, if you miss by 0.2 pounds, you just don't get to wrestle in the duel. There's not a second chance. You don't get time to go lose it. You step on the scale and it says 133.2 and you're 133, you're done. Right? So wrestlers, I mean, that's what we know how to do. And so, I remember that time and I was shocked by it. Obviously, he's found his way. I don't know if it'll be enough on Saturday night, but he's definitely, Henry always has a fighting shot because you never, he's going to surprise us.
But, Ben, where I was going with that was, maybe you're right. It's like, he's shown us nothing to this point to suggest that he can beat Mighty Mouse. Yeah. But maybe he does it, just like he won gold in Beijing.
And another person like that was, and it might speak to that champion mindset, but another person just like that was Holly Holm. I mean, if you would have told me Holly Holm was going to beat Ronda going into that fight, I had actually seen a few of Holly's fight on like the Access TV or whatever it was, and then her early UFC fights. She just didn't look that good. She didn't hit that hard. She wasn't great with everything, being a well-rounded fighter. There was really nothing that pointed to her kicking Ronda's ass. And then, boom, she did it, right?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I mean, Holly, she fought a Walmart greeter, a Taco Bell cashier, and then went in there against Raquel Pennington and literally a 38-year-old gym teacher named Renault or Merritt, something like that. And it was just like, Holly looks really uninspiring. Like, you're like, this is what the hype is about? What, are you kidding me? But, she looked so good against Ronda. It was just like, was she sandbagging? Was she working us here?
Yeah, maybe it's that, some people, and I know I've seen a lot of wrestling who they play to the level of their competition. And when the lights are bright, they show up, right? But if it's like a nobody, they'll wrestle like dog crap and just barely win. So maybe Holly's one of those. Maybe that's Henry too, because obviously Henry is, like I said, he's had a lot of subpar performances. So maybe he's gonna step up on Saturday night and shock us all.
Yeah, I mean that would be something. That would be one more championship, right, for the USA Wrestling team of 2008.
Well, I will
you
tell
guys are what, 42-1?
Well, Mako's also has a loss. So
Okay.
I think he's got one loss. So we have two losses as the four of us. But yeah, I think we're 40, so 48-2 or something pretty damn good. I'll tell you that much.
Sure.
So I think that transitions really well into the meat of really what we wanted to talk about. Because a lot of these old time wrestlers, they don't necessarily like wrestling people going in MMA. But I think what's been proven over the last 20 years plus is that wrestlers are just really, really freaking good at fighting people. Right? And am I off on that one?
Yeah. Yeah, they're the best. They've been training to cut weight since they were little kids. They've been building that core strength, the grip strength, and if you can dictate where the fight takes place, you just started with a tremendous advantage.
Definitely. So, so obviously if you take that 2008 team like you're talking about, that was the first time that the highest of high level wrestlers from freestyle crossed over to mixed martial arts. So, that initial wave, you did have a couple in the beginning, sprinkling a Mark Coleman, and a Kevin Randleman, who Kevin Randleman never wrestled internationally, but obviously he was a stud NCAA wrestler. But that first real wave of wrestlers into martial arts was that whole Greco team, right? So you got Matt Lindland, Dan Henderson, Randy Couture, and a bunch of other guys right in the area that were all Greco wrestlers, and for some reason, that maybe because they're friends, Chael, obviously, how did I forget him? Wow. For whatever reason, they all hopped into the sport of mixed martial arts really, really early on, and obviously almost every one of those guys I named had a huge amount of success. But 2008 was the first time you saw the freestyle guys hop into it, and obviously we've had a lot of success also. So, the point there becomes is we've also seen really, really high wrestlers. So say John Jones, who was a good wrestler, right? He was a JUCO champ. Or Demetrius Johnson, who was a good high school wrestler. He's a UFC champ. So at what point does the wrestling factor in? Like, do you have to be the highest of the high level, or is there a level that's good enough to make it in MMA and then you can be done and go fight?
I think if you're good enough, if you can stop a takedown, if you're like Robbie Lawler and you've figured out how to, sprawl and brawl, and keep the fight on the feet, then that's good enough. But I would say that the more credentialed you are, the more seasoned you are as a wrestler, the better. But obviously there's, even you look at a guy like Benson Henderson, a former champion that's going to fight in Bellator.
He's fighting for Rashkov tomorrow night, and I will tell you, Brian, I don't want to get off subject, but I'll tell you, if Kreshkov beats Benson Henderson, I'm going to be insufferable to people.
Yeah, that's going to make you look good. Yeah, because he wasn't even competitive. But I
out hit him 248-3.
He reason I bring up Benson was, he was not a very highly recruited guy. I think he went to some NAIA
He went to
school in the
Dana.
middle of
Actually,
Nebraska.
I watched him a lot at the Open tournaments wrestle. A lot of our backups, I believe a guy named James Williamson wrestled him a few times. I believe he might have wrestled Michael Chandler a couple times. So yeah, he like I said, he was a tough wrestler, but he wasn't an amazingly high level wrestler by any sense of the imagination.
Yeah, so I think some of these guys that are kind of like average Division I wrestlers, I don't think they should say, hey, I'm just an average wrestler. I probably wouldn't be good at this MMA thing. I think the guys should have a different attitude. It's like, sometimes, like Rochelle was a 3-time national champion, Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
Wasn't I don't even know if he was better than Shane Roller if you compare their success,
Yeah. And that's like, when you talk about the floor of an elite level wrestler, that's kind of like where they get to it. And so he was obviously made the UFC, I think 2-2 or 2-3, somewhere to that effect. But yeah, I was shocked he could never figure it out, because he was tough as shit in wrestling, and he really tapped pretty easily to some submissions. I was kind of shocked by Rochelle on that one.
Yeah, and I think he also had some neck issues that really messed with him, and then he just had to call it a career because he's, maybe a few years more down the road, he was looking at getting that thing fused. And I've talked to some guys in pro wrestling, like X-Pac, Sean Waltman.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And man, that's an awful procedure. I mean, that's some serious stuff.
Speaking of pro wrestling, I got ADD, so sometimes it's very hard for me to stay on task. I did watch, when I was overseas in Singapore, I watched the DDP and Jake the Snake Roberts, and that was awful. That was like torture, right? Seeing this dude relapse over and over and over again, and I guess it kind of had a happy ending, but it seemed to me like even though it had a happy ending, that dude is going to have a hard time staying clean.
Yeah, it's a daily struggle for a guy like that, man. That guy's just been through so much, and it's just an accomplishment that he's still alive.
Oh,
like,
God, yeah.
How is he still here? I was at WrestleMania a few weeks ago, and for the first time ever, I got to meet one of my great heroes, the Iron Sheik. And
yes,
yeah, it was such an honor to finally meet the Sheik after being such a fan of his. Just even the way I tweet is inspired from the Sheik and the way he talks. But it was kind of sad to see the type of shape that he was in. But being in bad shape, I guess, is better than the alternative that some of the other wrestlers have experienced, like we just saw with Joey Lauer, China, 45 years old.
Hey, I just got a message. Tommy will call in eventually. So, all right.
We go long enough. We'll link up with him. So
we'll be good. We'll be good to roll. So, okay, class of 2016, mixed martial arts, wrestling mixed martial arts. So here's who I got that we know is fighting for sure. And I think you and I have talked. I think we got a few other maybes or probablys or I don't know what the hell you want to call it, but not for sure. So here's who I got. Sure. I got Aaron Pico, Ed Ruth, Deron Wynn, and Tyrell Fortune are the ones that are fighting for sure. And I think you said probably Chris Perry and probably Jordan Oliver. Is that correct?
Perry, I think, is a bigger if. I know he's a huge fan of MMA, but it also comes from wrestling, royalty. So I don't think that's a for sure. But I really think Jordan Oliver, I have a strong suspicion he's very close to signing with Zinkin and going to train at AKA in San Jose.
So I've heard, actually, you know what I heard? I talked to Dwayne today. And I've heard that Deron Wynn and Ed Ruth have both now moved to Fresno, California to train full-time. And Aaron Pico will be splitting time between Fresno and LA, where I guess he's got a boxing coach that he's been working with since he was a young kid. So he's even thinking about taking a few pro boxing bouts, which is like, wow to me. I mean, this dude's almost makes the Olympic wrestling team at 19 years old, and is obviously going to make the transition to mixed martial arts. And now he's also going to take pro boxing fights. He's going to be like the ultimate combat athlete ever.
Well, on Twitter last week, I called him basically to MMA, he's like what LeBron James was in 2003 as a high school kid. There's never been an MMA prospect quite like him who has the background in pancreation, which if you look at the origin of pancreation, that is basically the original MMA. You know, it's like it combined wrestling and striking into one sport. I think it's something like 650 BC was the first, evidence of pancreation. So he's a national champion in pancreation. He's a national junior, Golden Gloves champion in boxing. He was damn close to being an Olympian in wrestling as a teenager, competing against grown men, which is, I can't understate that enough.
Making the team at 19, obviously, Kyle Snyder's made it seem more pedestrian, right? Because he won the world championships at 19, but making the Olympic team at 19 years old is, there's been no one that's done it in freestyle wrestling in 20 years or more. I mean, that's my recollection, right? That's when I started being a fan. But, I think maybe Jimmy Carr in freaking 1976. I mean, it's been a long time. It's been a really long time.
So, there's never been a prospect quite like this kid. And, hopefully the expectations, that it doesn't get to him, because it's going to be one of those things. He could go out there and his debut. I'm hearing some rumors of the fall for his first MMA fight. Maybe you know better than me.
I've not heard, but if I were him, and I think with what the Bellator structure has been lately, they're going to feed him some pretty easy fights. It's almost too much like what they're doing with Michael Venom Page, where they're really, 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 going very slow with him. But I'm suspecting that he's 19. They're giving him a few fights where he can get in there and look like the freaking world champion, right? That's what I'm assuming.
I gotta think his first couple fights will be against guys who are 0-0 like him, or 0-1 or 1-0, something like that, which is good. All those guys should start at that level. Ed Ruth, Tyrell Fortune, Deron Wynn. I'm interested to see him because he's pretty small, right? Height wise,
short for sure.
Yeah. So that's going to be interesting. I can tell he can scrap though, but I also thought Cormier was too short for heavyweight, and he beat up all the heavyweights before he went to 205.
Well, Cormier obviously understood. Fighting's all about understanding what you're good at and how to get to that one area, right? And Daniel did it really well. He never fought from the outside, which is something a short person shouldn't do. He always fought from the inside, and he blended it really well with his wrestling. And so obviously that worked really well for him. And that's what Duran will have to do. I personally think Ruth is going to be so freaking ridiculously good. I think he kind of lost his motivation for wrestling in the last year, which is kind of sad. As good as he was, I think he was already looking forward to mixed martial arts a little too early. But this guy, his what do they call it? Proprioception, when you understand where you are, where your body is in space.
Right.
That, his gas tank, his grip, his feel for the sport. Man, I think he's gonna be really, really hard for people to deal with. Hold on, we got Tommy calling in.
Oh, okay.
This is gonna be good. Tommy, what's up, man?
Yo. Sorry about that.
So you're our guest today. Me and Front Row Brian are hosting. Tommy's calling in.
Front Row Brian, how are you doing? We've never formally met.
Yeah, first time, man. Hey, pleasure to meet you. At least
but Tommy,
to you for the first time.
Don't ever meet him in person because he'll get freaking hammered and break your refrigerator.
I just think Front Row Brian. I think from what I gather, you look a lot like Bruce Willis. If I'm looking at your Twitter profile.
Yeah, who was it?
I did lead you to a life change, Brian, because I don't believe you've touched Jack Daniels since you left my house that night.
Ben, we gotta keep this flow friendly. Okay.
Okay. All right. My bad.
But I think it was Eddie Alvarez. I met him once. And he's like, yeah, but your Twitter picture, that's like an old guy. And I'm like, yeah, but that's Bruce Willis, though. I mean that in like kind of a funny way. I don't want Eddie to think I'm making fun of him, but
You are
great.
Okay, so Tommy,
Have you already let our viewers know what I've been up to the past hour and a half, 2 hours?
I didn't totally tell them. I told them that your car broke down and you were having AAA come to get you. But if you want to further elaborate on what your situation is and what's going on, then
I was picking my daughter up from her soccer practice, and I went to get back into my car, and the battery's dead. It's a 2012 Altima, and for some reason it didn't work, and so my wife then came to pick my daughter up because I lived 15 minutes from practice, and I waited for AAA to show up. It's just been one of those nights, It's not one of those situations that you post on Facebook and make a smiley face about.
Huh. So we were going through the class of 2016 here, Tommy. Wrestlers to mixed martial artists. I saved some of the bigger questions because I knew you were going to come on and I wanted to talk to you about it. But so 2016, I was talking about how good I think Ed Ruth is going to be. So we got Pico, we got Ruth, we got Ron Wynn, Tyrell Fortune, looking like they're all going to fight 100% for sure. And we're kind of going through those guys and talking about how tough they were going to be. You got anything to add about those guys?
No, I think those are all obviously huge MMA prospects. They all have different skill sets or different ways about how, mentally how they approach sport or combat for that matter. And I mean, yeah, we could talk about each one of them. I don't know if you've gone through all of them, but name them again. You got Pico, Ruth, Fortune, and who else?
Deron Wynn he's signed with Zinkin. He's out in Fresno.
Deron
he's
Wynn.
Training for mixed martial arts. He's a little older than the rest of them. I mean, Pico's 19.
Right.
Ruth's like 23. How old's Fortune? You know, Brian?
I want to say 24.
Okay. And then Duran's got to be, 27, 28, I'm guessing, somewhere around there?
I would say so, yeah.
If you want to expand this to international, there's the Greco world champion.
Oh, Bilal Makov.
Yeah, he's
Makov's coming over, huh?
Which is extra interesting because Dana always said I needed more experience, yet Bilal Makov is 0-0. just to throw that at you guys.
Which is weird because the only other two guys I remember they signed at 0-0 was James Toney and CM Punk.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you look at Makov and you watch him wrestle, and to my opinion, well, I think a lot more wrestlers should fight. But if there is a weight, if there's any weight more than other weights where I'd say some of these wrestlers need to go fight, it's heavyweight. The division is so thin. It is really, really, really super thin. I mean, you could be a top 10 guy in 3 or 4 fights, and these guys are all old. They're going to be gone in 3 or 4 years. Everyone in the top 10, damn near every one of them's old.
Yeah, can you imagine Nick Wisdowski? You put him in Bellator, he'd be the champion. You put him in the UFC, 5 fights, he's in the top 10.
Seriously, no problem. So yeah, I mean, obviously, I would say Makov's going to be, and I don't even know what his striking background is, or if he has any striking background. But going strictly based on wrestling, I mean, he's going to be hard to deal with very quickly.
Well, the other thing that's interesting, Ben, is that Makov cuts real weight to make 264 international.
He does?
Oh yeah, real weight. He probably weighs 300 pounds. Yeah,
no, he's not that big.
I know. I know that listen, man, I wrestled the weight class. He won the world championship the same year I got 5th. The guy sucks a lot of weight.
Ever?
What's that?
Have you beat him ever?
I never wrestled him actually, but his first world title was in 2007. He beat Alexi Rodriguez in the finals.
He must have been young at that point then, huh?
Yeah, he was like 21.
Okay. So he's almost 30 years old then.
Oh yeah. No, he's no spring chicken.
I didn't realize.
But
I thought he was like 25, 26.
He cut the ton of weight. He weighed 300 pounds. He's massive.
Wow, I guess watching him wrestle, I never realized he was that big. So Tommy, what's your guess? You think he's going to be a butt kicker right away or what?
No, I don't think he will be. I think there's a lot of... No, I don't think he will be. I think if you watch him lately, he struggles with the gas tank a little bit. And I just think transitioning over culturally and things like that will be an issue. I don't know anything about fighting, by the way, so I'm just talking out of both ends right now, but just my opinion, because I have one. I don't think he's that fast.
You watch fighting, right?
I watch
And
it.
you've
I
trained
watch
with,
it. I mean,
we
I'm
talked
a
about it. You
fan.
trained with these guys.
Yeah, I wrestled with those guys. I
mean,
guess you could
You
say.
trained Frank Mir, you trained Chet Congo, and you've been around these guys. You know what they have to offer.
I don't think Makov is. I don't think. I think MMA is advantageous to the pure athlete much more so than wrestling. And I don't know if Makov is the pure athlete type of guy compared to the heavyweights now in MMA.
Huh.
I don't think his transition will be as.
How do you think
What's
he
that?
compares to Cole Conrad from an athletic point of view?
Good point,
I would
because Tommy
say
beat Cole to make the 2017. That's correct, right, Tommy?
I beat him in the U.S. Open finals. I didn't in the trials. Mako made it out in mini
Oh,
tournament.
okay.
So, I would say that they're similar. Makov's probably, maybe a little bit better athlete. I don't know.
Hey,
man.
I will tell you a story.
feel-
Cole Conrad is an elite athlete. You want to hear a story about Cole Conrad, Tommy?
Well, I went to the rookie mini camp with him at the Jets trials. He is an elite athlete. We're talking about UFC top 5, top 6. I guess that's what the comparison I was trying to make for Makov.
I think, to tell the story first, Cole and I were doing a wrestling camp together. This is way back when. And I watched this dude. We were playing dodgeball. Tommy. He was the only person left on the team. They were throwing a bunch of balls at him, right? It was like a bunch of people versus he's the last one left. He catches one with his right hand. Boom. He catches one with his left hand. Boom. And he catches a third ball between his legs. I'm not even lying or making it up. I was looking at him like, holy hell, did that just happen? Like, are you kidding me right now?
Wow.
It was impressive.
That's the real deal.
The real deal. I thought
You got to
Cole,
put on the purple Cobras.
oh gosh. That's a great reference right there. I thought Cole, had he continued MMA, and obviously he chose a very lucrative path in the real world, much like yourself, but I thought had he continued MMA, he would have been very, very, very difficult for people to deal with. Doesn't matter what organization it was.
Well, he's massive too. I mean, he's a 300-pound guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's very large, big boy, and he knows how to train. He just knows how to train every day, all the time. So,
100%.
And the other thing about Cole was like he wasn't afraid to get hit. You could tell he was a tough guy. There were always stories about how he would really get the better of Brock Lesnar in training, and unlike Brock, he could mix it up, and he wasn't. A punch comes in, he wasn't flinching automatically. He was a legit fighter.
Yep, I heard the same exact thing. So, Tommy, I wanted to save a few of these bigger questions. So
So, what have you guys covered, and where are we at now? So I can kind of get in the game here.
We kind of just talked. We talked about that first wave of Greco wrestlers, who were the first real wrestlers to go from wrestling to MMA. Couture, Lindland, Chael, all those guys. Dan Henderson. Then we talked about obviously the class of 2008 Olympic team, which myself, Daniel, Henry, and then Steve fought a little bit also. And then we talked about the class of 2016. But so I saved the bigger questions because I think these couple of these are fairly philosophical when we talk about how wrestling is affected by mixed martial arts and wrestlers making the transition to mixed martial arts, right?
Oh yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. I mean, it's something that continues to be more and more prevalent, at least in the wrestling culture, which, what are our best guys going to do out of college or 2 or 3 years out of college? How many people are we losing to, the MMA career path, and what is it doing to the Olympic wrestling dynamic? And then by them going to MMA, how much is it helping wrestling or is it hurting wrestling?
These are all the questions I want to talk about.
It's just,
you're like going down my list right now.
Constant topic of discussion.
Okay, so first question. Let's go. First question. And Brian, you feel free to chime in also. When you're looking at guys,
we need to call Brian Bruce for the rest of the episode.
Bruce. All right, Bruce, whenever you're ready. When a guy's wrestling internationally, what's the proper time for them to go to MMA? Because I've been fairly critical of these people also. The ones that hang around, they're 5, 6, 7. And, we know they're never going to make a team. And they're not making very much money wrestling because, Tommy, you and I have both been the number one guy. And we know the number one guy doesn't make that much money unless your name's Jordan Burroughs.
Right.
But so these other guys, 4, 5, 6, when should some of them just go to MMA and make a crap ton of money?
So are we assuming that they really want to be an international wrestler? Or are we, what's going on in their mind? Is it something that they're complete? If they were competitive, it's something they'd rather do than do MMA?
Well, I think a lot of these people, a lot of these wrestlers are they're stuck being in the traditionalist mindset. Like, I have to do this, I have to coach and make this money. And, they don't kind of look outside because once you kind of escape the community, you see, like, sometimes I see it as silly when I know how much some of these guys are making. They're making $15,000 to $20,000 a year. And they could be making 6 figures, no problem fighting MMA. I have no doubt in my mind. So at what point go ahead.
I think if you know you're gonna go into MMA and you want to do it, and it's something that you definitely want to do whenever your wrestling career ends, you have to really critically evaluate if you're truly in contention or not. And if you're not, you're making if you're not in contention to be on the Olympic team or do whatever it is you want to do internationally, you're making a bad economic decision by staying in wrestling. If it's not something you want to do, then there's nothing wrong with wrestling, even if you're the number 6 guy. So I don't mean to give you a very blah answer, but to me, if you don't want, the question is, do they want to do MMA or not? And if they know they want to go pursue an MMA career, if you know you want to do it, then you should only be wrestling if you're in contention.
Yeah, but no, Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I was exactly what Tommy said. I'm so sick of seeing these guys who are, they've been through 2 Olympic cycles and 4 or 5 years of college. They're coming in 5th or 6th every year, and they keep going back. And I think Molinaro making the team as like the 9th seed, I think that's going to cause a lot of these guys to be like, hey, maybe I'll get lucky and I'll make the Olympic team too, out of nowhere, when they should be like, hey, I should go get a real job. This wrestling thing, I gave it everything that I had. I need to go get a real job, or maybe I got to go be a fighter and start making some money.
Yeah, for me, I think a lot of these guys, change is hard, Tommy. It's just like, it's like that girlfriend that you have, and you should break up with her, but you're scared because she's going to cry when you say you're out the door. Right? Do you know what I'm saying, Tommy?
Yeah.
Have you ever been in that situation?
I got you. Of course. We've all been there.
Heartbreaking, Tommy.
but I think we can't get lost on the motivation, what's inside somebody. So, we can't be critical of people that stay in wrestling and it's like he should be doing MMA. Well, what if he doesn't want to do MMA?
But it's the same thing. I mean, like, for me, obviously I've done both at a high level. Wrestling's more difficult, and to me it's not even close. Wrestling at the highest level in America and internationally, the training and everything that goes along with it is so much more difficult on your mind and on your body than mixed martial arts. I mean, like I said, I'm ranked top 10 in the world right now in MMA, and I'm a much better wrestler than I am a mixed martial artist, and I wouldn't sniff the top 10 in wrestling right now in the world. I wouldn't sniff it. I wouldn't be anywhere in the ballpark. I'm
glad we got this recorded. Holy cow, Ben.
Well, I mean, if I start training, you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But, I mean, to be totally honest about it, that's the truth. And, in MMA, these guys aren't that good at what they do yet. So, like, a guy like Andrew Howe, who's been second to Burroughs forever, this guy would murder people in MMA, right? Or a heavyweight like a Dom Bradley, would come and wipe the floor with people. So, why some of these guys aren't making the transition is mind-boggling to me, because it's the same thing, right? You get in the gym, you work hard, you try to figure out how to be good at exactly what you're doing, and then you go home and you eat some dinner, right?
No, if it's something you want to do, you if it's something you want to do, there's no reason to wrestle internationally to me, unless you're in contention for world and Olympic teams or even world and Olympic medals. And that's the whole point. It's kind of like hanging around in the Florida rookie baseball league, 12 leagues down for 8 years. You try it out for a few years. If you can't make it to the bigs and you're traveling around in a bus and staying in flea bag motels after 3 or 4 years, it's time to move on with your life. Not because you wasted not because you were wasting your time, but because you're about to be wasting your time.
Yeah.
Because you gave it a go, and it's now something that's not a real possibility, and you need to evaluate that and try to find ways to have that competitive outlet or whatever it is that you liked about the sport and apply it to building something outside of wrestling, so or inside of wrestling as a coach. But I think the sport is so tough. To your point, Ben, it's hard to do if you're not in contention for something, and it's hard to justify. So you see a lot of people, and it's a sensitive subject for me, because you also see a lot of people where they have a very real dream inside of them, and it's a legitimate opportunity, and there's a chance they could do it, and it's like, keep doing it. But then you have people that you just know they're hanger-oners.
Yeah.
They kind of know deep down, they kind of know deep down that it's not in the cards, but they're not sure what else to do. And so therefore they compete for 15 years or 12 years or 8 years. And so that's tough, for to watch too. So, it's different, man. It's just, there's not a whole lot of way to advance yourself in the sport from a livelihood perspective. So there's other avenues out there. If you want to do MMA, it's certainly proven to be a lucrative vehicle for a number of our best guys, yourself included, Ben.
Yeah.
And if it's not something you want to do, there's a lot of other things you can do in your life. I mean, there's a lot of other things. So go do something. Be productive. You know what I mean?
For sure. Okay. Big question. So I think this one's, to me, it's obvious, Tommy. Brian, I think it's obvious to you guys too. Brian, let's get your feel. So how has MMA affected the popularity of the sport of wrestling?
I'm not inside the wrestling bubble as much as you guys are. I kind of look at it as an outsider. I try to follow it the best I can. I think participation, you guys can correct me on some of these, but I think participation is up. The attendance record gets broken every year at the Nationals or NCAA. They were sold out at the Olympic trials. I mean, wrestling seems really popular. And, with all these concussions that are happening in football, a lot of moms are telling their kid, okay, you want to be in a contact sport, you can go wrestle. I'm not going to allow you to go play football. And, the concussion thing is also a big part about why guys, in wrestling are shying away from MMA, because that's totally for real. So any of these guys thinking about getting into MMA, I say, if you're not all the way in, then that means you're all the way out. But be all the way in for 5 years. And then at 5 years, know exactly what the hell you're going to do. Because you don't want to end up being one of these guys in your mid-30s, going around to the regional promotions trying to get one last paycheck. And then, you don't have anything on your resume other than beating guys up in a cage.
That's a good point. Tommy, what do you think? How has it affected the popularity of the sport of wrestling?
I think it's made wrestling a lot more popular. I don't know if it's increased participation. Maybe it has, maybe it hasn't. But it's made wrestling more popular, if that makes any sense. I don't think it's as taboo anymore to be a wrestler at the junior high or high school level. These kids have so much ammunition if they get made fun of for wearing tights, on a wrestling mat. All of these pop culture icons that we have that are relevant in MMA and now relevant in our culture. You could name the names. They either were phenomenal wrestlers or they train wrestling. And so to me, it's kind of made wrestling a little bit cool. It's given, it's kind of put the shine on wrestling a little bit as kind of a cool thing or somewhat cool thing, as opposed to this taboo sport that it's like, why would you do that? Instead, it's like, what do you mean, why would I do that? It's the number one discipline in mixed martial arts. All the UFC guys do it. And even though that sounds really surface level to say that, I guarantee you it gets said thousands of times a day across America in the lunchroom when somebody kind of cracks on wrestling to a high school kid who wrestles.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we were in high school, all three of us, at one point in time. High school, middle school is very surface level, right?
Right.
So, you know what? I agree with you to the point it's definitely made it more mainstream, more in touch with pop culture. The other thing, Brian mentioned, with the attendance record, I think it's given some wrestling people, a better idea on how to promote, right? Because one of the things that mixed martial arts does, whether it's the UFC or Bellator or One Championship, is they promote the crap out of their events because they're businesses and they don't exist without making money, right?
No doubt.
Which that's half of what allegedly the McGregor debacle is about. Even
well,
though
yeah,
it's really not. But
it's interesting, and I'll let you keep ranting then. But it's interesting because mixed martial art is at its very core is a for-profit deal, and wrestling, as of right now, at its core, is a non-profit deal. So,
unfortunately,
that's interesting.
Yeah, and
it's one of those things. I often wonder if you privatized it. If you privatized the post office, and you had the brightest guy from the Harvard Business School or Kellogg School at Northwestern, I bet you they could get that thing profitable, and people would think it was a great product. But sometimes, when these government bodies, they just kind of run these things into the ground,
Yeah, 100%. The other thing I was going to say about, and kind of to your point, Brian, a lot of levels it is like, just wrestling's in the schools and they don't promote it. But the one thing, Tommy, you said this phrase exactly, and I say this phrase all the time, but wrestling people, you don't hear it that much. Why don't wrestling people sell themselves as the number one martial art on the face of the planet? There is not a more effective martial art than amateur folk style wrestling. There isn't. You cannot argue it. It's not debatable. The facts are proven over and over and over again, whether you want to go rankings from the UFC, MMA, whatever you want to do, that folk style wrestling is the most effective martial art on the face of the planet.
No doubt. I mean, I don't even want to echo that because we're just going to beat a dead horse, but it is by far the most coveted discipline within the mixed martial arts. It's not even close, and we could leverage that even more than we already do to gain more notoriety, more visibility, more popularity.
I think so. That's what we got to do. So what do you think, and Tommy, you kind of touched on this, how does this affect our U.S. international teams? I think that's something that a lot of the older wrestling people get really annoyed about. And I know I got harassed when I hung it up in 2010 or 2008 when I was, essentially at the beginning of my international career. And I said, hey, I want to go fight. A lot of the older wrestling people tried to get me to come back because it makes Team USA better and tougher. And then, as soon as Burroughs came on the scene, no one ever bothered me about coming back anymore, which was fantastic for me. But so how does this affect our U.S. international team? How many of these guys could be making a difference? What do you think there?
From a performance perspective, culture,
perspective, yes.
Performance, I think we'd have more depth. We would have more depth, which would, it's like, hey man, Ben, you're a capitalist. If there's a lot of competition, the boat rises with the tide. And so the boat would, keep getting elevated. And so I think there would be more depth internationally for us. I don't think our Olympic team would be any better in the sense that you could take that guy that's in MMA, you can put him on the Olympic team right now. But I think, if there's more people competing, that can compete at a high level overseas, we'd probably be a little bit more competitive. But it doesn't bother me when people decide to go MMA because I feel like, Ben, wrestling is so hard. It's a choice. I mean, gosh, if you don't want to do it, then please don't do it because you're going to torture yourself. If you don't want to do it, then don't do it. I mean, it's just, you can't convince someone to wrestle. A lot of people tried to convince me to wrestle after 2008, and I tried to make myself wrestle. I was like, I don't want to do this. And then it got, I got the itch back inside of me about 2 years later, but if you don't want to do it, if you want to do something else, then whatever it is, you got to do it. And there's plenty of good reasons why MMA is a great avenue for people that have a wrestling background. There's too many good reasons to argue the logic, I guess.
For sure. Tommy, I was thinking Brian's kind of on our side on this. We should have got someone on the show who freaking hated MMA and thought every wrestler who went to do MMA was a freaking idiot.
Yeah.
That would have been fun to argue.
I know.
I wonder who is
something
against
to
that,
disagree
because
with
it's
you
like
about.
almost every single college has a plethora of high-level mixed martial artists, right?
Right. And I think the argument, I guess the argument that we're suggesting we could have with somebody, maybe like right around when you left, Ben, it was probably much more like 50-50, more of an issue that's split down the middle in the wrestling community. I think now, with the popularity of MMA, it's kind of like, I get it. I mean, I kind of get it. If that's what he wants to do, I get it. Because, and I don't think you see that as much in wrestling as we used to. You still hear it from the old guys. But I think, at the end of the day, it gives visibility to the sport.
Tommy and Ben, it's interesting. Some of these colleges now are attaching themselves to MMA fighters who have been really successful. Like, I kind of got a kick out of it. Like Cal State Fullerton, right? They cut their wrestling program, but on the front page of their sports website, they're like, Cal State Fullerton alum T.J. Dillashaw wins UFC championship.
I didn't see that. Are you serious?
Wow.
God.
The irony in that is amazing.
Wow.
So it's like even like these, colleges that are, they're state institutions, like they're like trying to attach themselves to the success of somebody who's beaten somebody else up in a cage.
Interesting. Good stuff.
Fighting solves everything. It really does. Right? Since the beginning of time.
Ben, do you think though, like, because I think like some of the things that I say on social media about wrestlers coming to MMA, like I think it upsets people like that from the wrestling world. Like,
yeah, 100%. I mean, I think some wrestling people get their feathers ruffled when you point out the fact and the truth. And guys, this is why I fought mixed martial arts, because I wasn't making a lot of money. I mean, I'll tell you exactly what I was making. I was making $18,000 from the University of Missouri. I made $10,000 from USA Wrestling. I made $5,000 from Adidas. And I got a few bonuses when I won some tournaments here and there. And then everything else I made, I was hustling, selling T-shirts, doing clinics and camps and stuff like that. But my base salary, right there, right? My base salary was $33,000, and I was the number one guy, right? And so
Ben, we've never had this conversation, but like, why did you leave?
I always had the interest, right? I always had an interest in MMA. I watched the original stuff back in the day, right? And then obviously, while I was in college, it was becoming more and more popular. And it was just, I love combat sports, whether it's wrestling or fighting or whatever it is. I love it, right? And so...
But how old were you? How old were you in 2008?
I was 23. So, for international terms, I was super young. Super young. But, I saw the future, and, I saw that, hey, I'm probably going to be having a wife and a family within a few years, which obviously I have a wife and 2 kids now. I saw that happening, and I just thought I wanted to be able to put some money in the bank for my family, and money is not the end of everything, Tommy, but making some money makes things a lot easier in your life. I mean, just bottom line. And frankly, it allows you to help people, and it allows you to do exactly what you want to do, right? I do what I want to do every single day because I've made enough money to be able to make those choices. I can't say what that's called, Brian, on the radio, but you know what I'm talking about. The Virgil term. So, that's why I chose to go to mixed martial arts. And, thankfully it's afforded me, like I said, a great life. And it's not something I see as I'm going to do till I'm 40. I'm going to do it for another year or 2. I'm going to finish making a whole bunch of money. And then I'm going to coach wrestling because I love doing that as well. But that was kind of where I saw it. And, I saw if I I could have continued wrestling and, lived a very modest life, which is nothing. There's really nothing wrong with living a modest life. But that wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to go make some money. I wanted to fight, and I wanted to have and be able to have a nice, comfortable living for my family.
So, when you obviously your goal was to win in Beijing, it didn't happen. Was it difficult, or was it easy to say, I'm going to walk away from the possibility of winning the Olympics in exchange for an MMA career, which economically, Ben, you have clearly made the right choice.
Yeah.
So there's no argument there.
Yeah.
But I'm just talking about, was that a crossroads for you? You're 23 years old.
Sure.
You're a baby on the international scene. You just popped onto the scene. The Olympics didn't go the way you want. You don't have much international experience. You can certainly improve in the sport of wrestling at this point, right after the Olympics in Beijing. And you make the decision, and it proved to be the right decision economically. And strictly economically, you can never argue the logic to the decision you made. But talk about, I mean, you were a guy that could have legitimately pursued another 4 years and possibly had a lot more success at the international level. So was that something that was tough for you?
At the time, no. It's only really in the last year where I think shoot, if I stuck around, I could have beat Jordan Burroughs and prevented him from doing what he did, possibly, right? Or had at very least a great rivalry series like Kenny Monday, Dave Schultz type of thing, something like that. But really from 2008 to 2015, I didn't think about that at all. And in 2008, when I got done, obviously I was disappointed with how the outcome of the Olympics went. But I thought that was the perfect opportunity for me to try mixed martial arts. And actually, Team Takedown approached me in 2007 when I graduated college, and I saw the financial disaster that was way ahead of time. And obviously, that's turned out to be a financial disaster.
Is that the Johnny Hendricks deal?
Yeah. Johnny Hendricks management group.
Those guys called me in I want to say 04 or 05. So they offered me a sweetheart upfront package, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I always thought it was betting against myself because I figured if I won a lot of money, I'd actually lose a lot of money because of the deal they have. And that was what happened to Johnny Hendricks, and I think he's been pretty bitter about it. Okay, but so in 07, they called me. I said, listen, it's 16 months to the Olympics. I got to make this run. This has been a dream of mine for years, right? So I get done with 08, and I think, well, I might as well go get some fights as quick as I can, right? Kind of like this is what Brian earlier talking about. This with Pico. He needs to go get fights right away because I got to figure out is this for me, right? And then within 18 months of my MMA career starting, I won the Bellator tournament. I won the Bellator title, and I made in that 6 months between when sponsorships were good in mixed martial arts, but in that 6 or 7 months, I made I think $220,000 or $240,000 or something like that, right? And I'm the Bellator champion. So I'm like, well, I guess this is for me, I guess this is what I'm doing now. And
right. So you weren't completely sold then when you started out then?
No, not at all. In 08, when I got done with the Olympics, I said, I'm going to give it a shot. Right now, I'm going to give MMA a shot. If I hate it in the next year, I go back to wrestling. I got 3 years till the London Olympics. I'm good to go, right? I can come back.
Right.
So, like I said, I win 3 fights pretty in quick order. Bellator calls me. Bellator puts me in a tournament a few months later. I win that. Then I won the belt. And then, and then I kind of said, okay, this is what I'm doing. But yeah, so I mean, for other wrestlers, I see it as sometimes they don't give that thought process an opportunity. And when you get in the gym and, you train the same way you train for anything, and it's almost easier because of the level of competition. And you can
Ben,
go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I was going to say, for some of these guys, these really high profile guys that are in their early 20s in wrestling, they don't even want to get in an MMA gym because they're like, if I go into that room and I start having fun and I find out I'm pretty good at this and I love this, I'm not going to feel the same way about wrestling that I do right now. So it's almost like they don't want to be, they don't want to take a sip of MMA, if you will, because they're afraid they'll like it, and that Olympic dream in 2020 is now it's out the window.
Yeah, that's actually pretty fun. You know what, Tommy? That actually made me think of a question for you. Because I was thinking, Brian, when you said that, I think, like, when they go and they put their hands on some of these guys, like, for me, when I put my hands on someone, I got a good idea if they could ever beat me up or not. And, so, like, Tommy, when you put your hands on a few of these guys you train with, and you realize, grappling-wise, you could probably get the upper hand on them, for sure. Didn't that make you want to say, hey, forget that, I can do this crap? Didn't you ever think that, or no?
That's a loaded question. I mean, yeah, when I train with these guys, I mean, I don't know that I could have beat them in a fight, but I do know this. I could take them down with my eyes closed if I didn't get kicked in the face. And if I had them on the ground, I could smother them for days. For days.
Exactly.
And so
that's like 2/3 of the battle.
Well, it's pretty boring. Honestly, it's probably not very marketable. But yeah, I recognize that from Jump Street. But the reason why I never went to an MMA, I guess I thought about it, kinda. I got pursued pretty heavily, a number of times by a number of entities, and I guess it just came to this, and you're gonna make fun of me for this, Ben, but two things are a guarantee in MMA to me. If you do it, if you maximize your opportunity in MMA, two things are a guarantee. One, you're gonna have to stand over someone and beat them senseless, and two, you're gonna get beaten senseless. And I don't want to do either of those.
Well, no, the goal is to beat them senseless, not get beaten senseless, Tommy.
I know, man, but everybody's gonna have their day, man.
Hey,
everybody.
I haven't had my day yet, so we'll.
No, getting your hand raised and getting beaten senseless are two different. I've seen some pictures of you where it looks like you had a tough day at the office.
Yeah, I mean,
even though you got the hand raised.
They had the opponent had a tougher day at the office. If you
I know that, but anyways, so it's kind of a cupcake way to look at it, but that really is. I mean, we could talk about it for hours, but that's the root of why I never got into it. It's just not in my makeup to want to do that. And you know, honestly, Ben, I'm just as entertained by business opportunities as I am, you know, doing MMA or competing in wrestling. To me, it's all the same. Competing is competing. I think checkers is entertaining to me as you know, other things, because if I'm trying to beat someone, I'm trying to beat them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sure.
Tommy,
sure.
You make a really good point, because MMA is just it's not for everybody. I think it takes you know, a couple screws loose in a healthy kind of way, you know, to be really good at this thing. You know,
just punch him in the face till the ref stops it. What's the issue?
Yeah, I mean, look at your fellow Mizzou Tiger, Mark Ellis, was highly recruited out of Mizzou to go out to AKA. Javi Mendez let him live in his house and, you know, gave him some money to start up. And he was all gun ho, you know, and I thought, oh yeah, this guy's going to be great. And it turned out, guy wasn't a fighter. He didn't have the mindset where, you know, I've been around you before your fight in Singapore, and you know, I think I asked you, I said, are you okay, you know, going to bed tonight knowing if you're going to fight or not going to fight? And I think you said to me, I don't care either way. I'll fight him, or if you don't want to fight, you don't have to fight. You know,
and I love that. I love being around people that think that way. I love being around people that think that way. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah,
you know, it's interesting what you said. It kind of reminds me, and this has nothing to do with MMA. Really, it has to do more with like, you know, kind of it factors or things that I think make people successful. And I feel like one of the key ingredients that I see in somebody, or one of the key characteristics that I see in somebody that is successful, it doesn't matter what it is that they really have a deep sense and understanding. They know themselves. And you got to know that you're made for something. And
that's a good point.
And Ben, I think you know. I think you knew that I can do this. I intuitively know this is kind of up my alley.
Yeah.
And I kind of felt that. I felt that way about MMA on the out. It's like, maybe on paper, you know, take my credentials on paper, or my physical makeup or my, profile or whatever it is. Like, oh yeah, he'd be great. Everyone's telling me that, but it's like, I think I know something about me that you guys don't. And that is, I don't think this is for me. But there are other things where I jump into them head first. They're like, why are you doing this? It's like, cause I know I want to do this. That's why. You know what I mean? And
That's a good point.
And that's interesting, Ben, because you're such a deductive reasoning type of person. I mean, you're very logical. People think you're illogical. You're very logical, and just the way you broke down what was going through your mind in 2008, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
And it's just because that I wouldn't have done it that way doesn't mean that I don't understand why you did it for yourself.
For sure. Well, guys, we've been talking forever. Unless you guys got any closing thoughts, I think we should wrap it up before our listeners get too bored. Tommy, we didn't get to talk. We were supposed to be on early, talk about Spencer Lee and Gavin Teasdale. Let's save that for next week. That'll be fun. And then we also will have the Olympic qualifiers to talk about next week. But you guys got any last thoughts about wrestling and MMA? Wrestlers going to MMA?
I do want to just say on the record, I don't know if you guys covered, but I think MMA is good for wrestling overall. We could isolate specific situations, but I think MMA has been nothing but good for wrestling.
Agreed,
personally.
100%.
Yeah, I would echo those. I think wrestling's good for MMA because it brings a lot of great athletes to the table, and MMA can bring a lot of visibility to wrestling. I mean, I'm a good example. I became a wrestling fan because I was an MMA fan first, and I said, I have to understand where these guys are from, what their backgrounds, what's their credentials. So I became a wrestling fan after MMA. So that was like, wrestling is growing by awareness from MMA.
For sure. So, all right, Brian, thanks for coming on as our host. Tommy, glad you got your car fixed and you ended up on the phone with us. So next week we'll be back. Thanks for it, everybody. Rich Bender's coming on next week. We got some tough questions for Rich. I like him, but I'm gonna ask him some tough questions, Tommy.
Let's do it. Let's go. I'm sure he'll be ready.
Let's go. All right, thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Thanks, Brian. See ya.
You are listening to the T-Row and Funky Show, brought to you by Defend Soap. Defend what you have built.
Brought to you by All Force Nutrition, a wrestling company with products for wrestlers, by wrestlers. They sponsor a plethora of senior level athletes, including David Taylor, John Rear, Dustin Schlater, Zach Sanders, and their products are delicious. I've had their post-workout. I've had their pre-workout. I'm even getting old, so I'm taking some of the joint pills. Log on to allforcenutrition.com and get some of your products today.